Hi, my name is Hannah, and tonight I am going to be talking about how the movie Bell Book and Candle is a great representation of what media depicted witches as in the mid 1900s and how they managed to put in a lot of historical references and beliefs of witchcraft into the film. So, firstly, it is difficult to speak of representation of witches in the mid 1900s without mentioning the fact that while I chose a lighter hearted movie, there were a lot darker representations in the form of horror movies, such as Black Sunday, Burn the Witch, and Rosemary's Baby, which came with its own supernatural predicaments. However, there were a lot of um, lovely depictions of witches in the media, such as I Marry the Witch, the long standing show Bewitched, and of course, Bell Book and Candle, which is what I'll be focusing on. So the movie is set in the late 1950s, 1960s, in Manhattan, New York, on Christmas Eve, where we meet the enchanting Gillian Hollyrod, her quirky aunt Queenie, and the very mischievous Nikki, who is a warlock, and we'll touch on him a little bit later. Gillian is played by Kim Novak, and she's depicted as a mysterious, beautiful shop owner. And she immediately stands out from other female characters, especially the human characters that you'll see in passing in the movie, because she's often depicted wearing black and red, which were seen as very sensual colors and therefore not always appropriate for women to wear. She also tends to wear a lot of pants, which, again, at the time, it was a little risque and more women wore skirts. She also tends to move in an almost feline fashion and speaks with a very low, sultry voice. So, by depicting her this way, it really sets her apart from the humans in the film and outside social norms, which is how witches have often been viewed throughout history. In the past, especially during the witch trials, women who were accused of witchcraft tended to be accused of being inappropriate, being very sexual creatures. They were independent and they often were accused of stealing other women's husbands, which kind of happens in this film. Kind of. All of these behaviors were seen as extremely inappropriate as women were supposed to be very demure, and sex, at least for women, was only supposed to be to provide your husband with children. So, throughout meeting more characters, we are often reminded of how Gillian is seen as odd for small assorted things, such as not wearing shoes in school, which sets her apart and makes her kind of an outsider amongst the humans. This is actually mentioned in a club where a lot of witches gathered in the area, which is called the Zodiac. And this is referencing astrology, which is often associated with modern witchcraft, even though it's not technically a part of witchcraft, but it is often practiced alongside witchcraft in the modern days, just like tarot and a few other things. So, next we touch on the name Nick or Nikki. It's kind of a roundabout reference to the name Old Nick, which was a name used for the devil. And this is kind of a nod to the fact that it was believed that witches got their powers from the devil, whether it was from selling their soul or marrying the devil or becoming his consort. So Gillian is quite reserved as far as witches in the media go. We don't see her use her powers very often, but the one time we do notice it is when she enchants her neighbor, Shep Henderson, played by Jimmy Stewart, with a love spell through the use of her familiar, which is a Siamese cat named Pyewacket. During this particular scene, she holds the cat very close and hums the enchantment while Jimmy's character just continues to drone on about nothing. By doing this, she actually has the cat very close to her face, and we notice a lot of her features are very feline. So again, very different, very sensual, very cat-like. And whether it was on purpose or just happy coincidence, you also notice how her eyes and the familiar's eyes are very similar. And either this is by coincidence or it is a nod to just how connected witches and their familiars are supposed to be. So, apart from this moment, we do witness one other moment using a potion that was given to her by Nikki, but that's it. However, we do hear past times that she used her craft, such as creating an entire week full of thunderstorms just to get back at somebody that she didn't like. It has been often said that witches across many different cultures are able to influence the weather for whatever reason they feel like. As witches in both the movie and in history are often said to be selfish and jealous. Kim Novak's character does actually say this in the film, that she's a very jealous person, though obviously that's not the case. Given everything that I've said, you would think that there's no more that they could possibly slip in. There's so many references and so many little nods. However, you'd be wrong. As I mentioned, Gillian has a familiar, a cat named Pyewacket, which is a very odd name. However, if you look back to the 17th century in England during the Pendle witch trials, there was actually an accused woman who was said to have a familiar named Pyewacket. And if we add this information to when Queenie mentions the fact that they once lived in Massachusetts for a time, which is where the Salem witch trials occurred, you have to wonder if they're implying that the three of them are much older than they appear, and that maybe they've been around a lot longer. So there are other nods towards witches, one being something that is so quick that you could miss it. When searching for the Zodiac Club, Jimmy Stewart's character Shep finds a yellow line on the sidewalk, and he simply says, "Just follow the yellow line." But the way he says it, you can tell he's kind of referencing the Yellow Brick Road, which is in The Wizard of Oz. And then finally, there is the title itself, Bell, Book, and Candle. This refers to a very extreme version of excommunication used during the 9th century. It was used by the Roman Catholic Church to expel a person from the church and essentially damning them. It would cast them out of both their religious life and from their community. In the movie, a toast is actually made which refers to this ritual when a occult history writer raises his glass and says, "Ring the bell, close the book, and quench the candle." This is referring to the stages in the ritual itself. He goes on to explain that it was used to exorcise witches of the past to take away their powers. This could be an artistic reference to Gillian's fate when she breaks an old superstition that her family has heard about growing up. So the movie ends with Gillian falling in love with the object of her love spell, Shep, which causes her to lose her powers and become human because, according to the story, witches are not allowed to fall in love. So after she does this, we notice a very dramatic change in her character. Her shop that once sold very interesting worldly artifacts now instead sells a lot of glass figures and flowers and art and just very feminine things. And then she also ditches her usual black and red and trouser outfits for a very traditional demure dress of white and yellow. This change is used to make her transformation to human more apparent, as she no longer looks like an outsider and no longer appears to be different. That's all the time I have. I hope you enjoyed our little fact filled video, and I hope that you'll go on to enjoy the film.